Great to be chatting again with our friends at Meat and Livestock Australia. We're with Steve Bignell today. Steve, how are you going?
Yeah, good, thanks, Ricky. Thanks for having us.
Always a pleasure, and I've got my Meat and Livestock Australia hat I picked up at a field day recently. Very pleased to be wearing that proudly around the place as well. It's this summer's must-have item.
It is. Always good to see our merch out there.
Well, the market's in pretty good shape as well, bearing in mind it took a fair old dip during July. Looking on the cattle front, first of all, Steve, we seem to be back on again on the upward movement.
Yeah, we are. Interestingly, in the last week, just since the start of September, we have seen supply fall nearly 30%. And as a result, we've seen that price increase 2% to $10.50.
So we've had a La Nina prediction from the Bureau in terms of an expectation that we're going to have a wetter this season expected, and certainly a bit of a dump of rain going on Wednesday into Thursday this week. Is there a bit of sort of desire to hang on to stock and maybe keep increasing the herd numbers?
The interesting thing is the restocker percentage of buyers, so producers looking at buying to restock their herds, that actually was sitting above 50% for a while. That's actually now at 40%, and feeders have come back in a strong way. So feedlots are now buying 48% of young cattle in Eastern Australia, and they're actually paying again over $10. So this week it went back over $10. So feeders are quite active. They're driving a lot of the activity at the moment.
Yep, that's why we check in with you about it, Steve. There is a bit of action on the feedlot front as well. You've got a report out from MLA about what's happening in that sector.
Yeah, so we did. We got the feedlot capacity utilisation and numbers on feed report for the June quarter. And what we did see in that quarter, which is interesting, this goes back to probably that period you're talking about in sort of May and June. We did see numbers on feed there. They're still at record historically high levels. They're only slightly off what they were at the start of the year, which was the highest on record. They're sitting at the third highest they've been at the number of cattle we have on feed, and that's at 1.2 million head.
Right, that's a big number. And I guess why are we sitting, for those that are probably not as familiar with it, why are we sitting at so many on feed?
Interesting dynamic. So normally you would expect more to be on feed during a drought period. We saw that when we sort of hit some peaks in sort of 2018, but because everything, at least down south, is full, and there's sort of, I wouldn't say there's an availability of grain. There's an incentive for producers to add additional kilos because of where the price is in terms of historical context. And there is grain around. Whether it's cheap, that's another question, but there is sort of access to grain. So that is, all of those factors are contributing to sort of more cattle on feed.
All right, well, looking across on the sheep front, it does seem that we are back on the seasonal run, a bit wobbly, but still generally in that spring flush period.
Yeah, so we obviously expect to see the young lambs come through. They always sort of come through in Forbes a little bit earlier and sort of some of that southern New South Wales area. So as we see those young lambs come through, we expect to see numbers come through and more young season lambs come through, and that helps push the price up historically. And we're seeing, look at the heavy lamb indicator, it has come up from those sort of late July lulls.
And was there any feedback MLA was getting that there was some element of processor challenges during that period of that lull in recent months as well, and struggles of running at full capacity on the processing side?
So a lot of it was making up processing from last year. So we know in the peak processing period, which is the back end of the year, last year, Victoria, which processed around 50% of the lamb kill, reduced their capacity back to 80%. And so we knew there were a lot of lambs from last year that sort of had to be processed earlier this year, and it created sort of a flow-on effect. We had higher lambing percentages this year and last year, so large lamb cohorts. But when we actually fast forward to this year, we've had a ripper run of processing for the last 4 weeks, well up above 400,000 head. Last week, we slaughtered 410,000 sheep. And for comparison, last year it was 348. So we're processing an extra 60,000 head a week at the moment on last year. So any conversation about processor throughput, there was an element of that at the start of the year, but that's definitely not the case now.
Yeah, good to know that's in the past, and good to see some big numbers moving through. Steve Bignell from Meat and Livestock Australia, thanks so much for joining us with an update for Day on Flow.
Thanks for that, Ricky.